Hey everybody, welcome to Acrylics Made Easy. Today we're going to paint a moonlit coastal scene. Alright, on our palette over here we've got golden fluid acrylics, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, Payne's gray, carbon black, and titanium white. We're going to start with a large filbert brush. This is a number 50 filbert brush. Going to put some white on there with a little bit of that quinacridone magenta. Okay, let's start with that. We've got a 16 by 20 inch canvas here with a piece of tape sitting at 7 inches up from the bottom. We're going to start by throwing some of this magenta and white on there right at the top of the tape, making sure I'm overlapping the tape a little bit so that the color goes all the way down. I'm going to go about a third of the way up, maybe a little bit more than that with this magenta before I start shifting that color. And let's shift it. Let's put a little bit more magenta and some ultramarine blue now on the brush. Gives us a nice purple color. I think that'll be good. Let's use that. Maybe a little bit more blue. There we go. All right. I like that. Let's put that on the canvas right where we left off. I'm going to start by just putting a stripe of it across there. And then as I start sort of running out of paint on the brush, then I'm going to take the brush back down to where these two colors meet. And just gently back and forth, work those colors together. Bringing the brush a little bit down and then a little bit back up. You end up with a pretty smooth blend, even with these acrylic paints. Using a nice soft brush like this. As long as you paint one color right after the other, you can blend them together. I promise you. Let's get a little bit more ultramarine now. Push this sky even darker. And we'll put another stripe of that on there. Again, I'm just going to put the paint on there first. Doesn't matter if I have a really sharp edge there to start, as long as very soon after applying them, I take this brush, just holding it halfway on the darker color, halfway on the lighter color, work it back and forth a few times, and get that edge to go away, and then bring it down a little bit further, and up a little bit further. We're getting a nice blend of color in that sky, really enjoying that. Let's get back to our palette, put some more blue, and we'll get darker. We're going to put some of that Payne's gray on there. That's a nice dark bluish gray that I really like to have on my palette right there. Beautiful. Let's put that at the top of the sky. Here we go, across the top. Finishing up the canvas with that. And again, apply the color first, and as long as you have done both these colors within a 10 or 15 minute at the max time range, then you can just start blending them together. I pretty much put the color on there and blend it right away. That gives us a nice dark sky up top, nice and bright at the bottom. That's going to be beautiful with the moon and some stars on there. Let's do a little sort of coastal mountain coming down toward the horizon over here. So let's get back to our palette. I want a little bit lighter color for that. So we're going to just give this brush a little wipe. Quick rinse. I'm going to use this one here. And let's go with this sort of lavender color that we've mixed up before. It's got some blue and magenta. Yeah, something about like that I think will work nicely. And we just want a low sort of hillside with a crisp top edge and then sort of blending out the bottom a little bit. I think that'll be nice for the background. Okay, we're going to give this a few minutes to dry before we move on to the next step. All right, once we've given this canvas a few minutes to dry, we can peel off our tape. And we're gonna raise it up. Now we're gonna cover up the bottom of the sky and this little mountain we just painted. And we just want the bottom of this tape to sit right on our horizon. So that we can paint our water up to it, have a nice straight horizon without having to work too hard. Gotta love it. Okay, let's get over to our palette here. And before we start painting the ocean, I wanna give a little bit of an outline for where our hill's gonna come across. So just a light color. I'm gonna give a little bit of magenta, a little bit of blue, make just a light sort of lavender. Yeah, something like that. Okay. So we're gonna have the ocean here, we're gonna have a hillside coming down with a big tree here. So I don't want to have that ocean color all the way across the canvas. I'm going to put a hill. It's going to come just right from the horizon, sort of, down, and then I'm just going to drop it off, like that. Okay. I think that'll be pretty cool. Let's leave this space open for now and paint in that ocean. So I'm actually going to start with this lavender color that I've already got mixed up. Just load the brush up with that. And making sure to overlap the tape just a little bit. Just going to paint all the way across the horizon first with that light color. And I'm just going over to my reference line here. I'm not going to worry too much about if I go a little bit past it. But what I don't want to do is leave any empty space. So make sure I go at least to that reference line. And once I have the horizon painted all the way up to the tape and a little bit overlapping the tape, I can go ahead and pull that tape off. And you see it gives me that nice, flat, straight horizon. We're just going to work our way down on the ocean here. So I want to get that color a little darker. I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to it. Alright, beauty. Let's put that on our canvas. So I'm going to just go maybe 2 or 3 inches down. Again, I want to fill up the space and go just over to my reference line here. And then just where this dark blue meets that lavender that we put toward the horizon, I'm just going to turn the brush sort of vertical so I'm using the whole width of the brush and just blend the two colors together a little bit. That's looking great. Okay. Now let's get the water even darker as it comes down toward the bottom of the canvas. So a little bit more blue. Let's get a little bit of magenta in there. And a hint of Payne's gray, why not? That'll be a lovely color. Let's put that on our canvas. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint this color all the way down to the bottom corner. Just filling in the space first, then I'll worry about sort of smoothing it out and where it meets the other color, just a few brush strokes back and forth to get that sort of blend going. Alright, now let's put a little bit of texture on that ocean surface, shall we? Let's get over to our palette. I'm going to give this brush a little bit of a rinse and get some dark color on there. So this Payne's gray is a really nice dark color just on its own. I'm going to use that. Over here on my ocean surface. Now at the bottom of the canvas, I want there to be some sort of thicker lines like this. And then I'm going to make these lines thinner and thinner as I work my way up towards the top. And closer together. Now you can see I'm doing horizontal lines, but I don't want them to be super, like, perfectly straight. What I'm going to do is as the paint runs out on this brush, just keep working my way up, trying to paint as thin and light of lines as I can as I work my way up toward the horizon, and it's just going to all sort of fade out This texture is going to fade out into that distance. Just like that. Alright, lovely. Let's get back to our palette. Give this brush a quick cleaning, give it a rinse, a little wipe here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to load up our brush with some carbon black. Okay, we're using this 3/4 inch flat, very versatile brush. Love these flat brushes. You turn them on the side and do little details like we just did with the ocean surface, or you can just use the full width of them and really fill in a space pretty quickly. They also do have that square shape, so if you're painting buildings or anything that needs like a sharp line, really handy to have these flat brushes. In fact, a lot of times when I teach my painting classes in person, I bring these flat brushes along, sometimes only the flat brush, because you can do so much with it. I'm going to go ahead and fill in this whole corner here. Just get it nice and dark. And you see I've just given that top edge just, you know, a little bit of some character, you know, something going on there. You can even poke out a couple little blades of grass and little plants there if you want. We're going to put a tree on it, but you know, maybe it wants some foliage around it, so why not just poke out a couple little blades of grass? Sure. That's nice. Okay, we're going to leave that for a few minutes and get up into our sky. Okay. So giving this brush a little wipe, a little rinse. We are going to, I think we'll use this brush to paint our moon. So just getting most of that dark paint out of it. I want a nice bright light color for the moon. Let's get just white and a tiny bit of lavender, a tiny bit of that magenta. And yeah, I do want lavender, so I'm going to get a little bit of blue too. So just the lightest ever lavender color. And here's how we're going to paint our moon, folks. We're going to take a roll of tape. This is just standard blue roll of tape. I don't know the brand. Scotch, I guess, but it doesn't matter. Just going to hold it up here in the sky where I want my moon to be. And making sure to keep that pressure on there. I don't want it to move. Just going to work my way around the inside of that with my brush. Go ahead and fill in the rest of the space while I'm here. Again, holding it tight against the canvas. We got ourselves a nice round moon. Okay. Now we want to put some shadows on this moon. So I'm going to get a little bit of this lavender going. A little bit of this blue, a little bit of this magenta. Push it further into lavender. There we go. That's nice right there. And you know what the shadows on the moon kind of look like. Some people say it's like a bunny rabbit. Some people say it's a man in the moon. But you do it however you want. You can call it whatever you want. Let's get a little bit darker color. When I was in college, my astronomy professor said that he thought it looked like an elephant jumping off a rock. So like this lower part is the rock, and then there's the elephant. So this long little trunk. His front legs, and then his back legs are kind of bent. Anyway, like I said, you see whatever you want to see in the moon. I think that looks beautiful though. Let's leave that and work on our big tree. So I'm going to give this brush a little rinse, a little wipe here. And we're going to get dark again, folks. We're going to get into that black paint. And on the coast here in Santa Cruz where I live, what we have is a lot of eucalyptus trees. They're not native. Some people really hate them because they're not native and they fall over easier than some of the other trees. But I'll tell you what, as an artist, silhouette of a eucalyptus tree is just a beautiful thing. So I'm giving it some trunks. They usually kind of split up in a few different directions. Put a couple out to go a little bit lower. And maybe one more over here. That'll work. Now the fun part about the eucalyptus is it has these lovely tops that are just sort of rounded across the top, almost like an oak tree. But of course the trunk is a lot longer and straighter. So you just get these beautiful sort of elevated, rounded sort of tops with little spaces, and you can just put a few more little branches in like that. And what I'm doing here is I'm holding this flat 3/4 inch brush just against the canvas, sort of almost laying it on the canvas, so that I'm really using the width of it to make some big, bold strokes. Okay, I'll let this tree go right off the canvas. Come across these trunks here. You know, you can come in and add a couple little ones. But overall, you just want to keep the top of these little blobs that you're making rounded at the top, and then let them get a little loose at the bottom. And let's get a little more paint on the brush. Again, I'm just using black. It's carbon black right now. And get ourselves a nice branch coming out this way. Kind of break it up around the edges a little bit. I'm using the corner of the brush just to make some sort of loose marks. Then laying it on there to put some really big, bold shadows. You know, eucalyptus trees are oftentimes very full trees. They got a lot of branches, a lot of leaves. Going almost down to the bottom. Alright, it's a beautiful looking tree we're making here, folks. Let's put a little bit of highlight on that trunk and let it pop out from the background a little bit. So, and give this brush a little rinse, a little bit of a wipe. Hard to get all the black paint out of there, but you can get most of it. If you go back and forth between wiping it and rinsing it like that. Alright, that's pretty clean. I want a nice light lavender mix here. Something like that. Let's go over our tree. So that black paint we all just laid on there is pretty wet still. I'm going to take advantage of that by putting this new paint on there, which is a light lavender color. Just right on top like that. And the second time I touch the canvas, it's already picked up some black, so it'll be a little softer. The third time it'll be even softer than that. And even if I turn it over and use the other edge, it's just a very soft mark. And that's what I want. I want just the brightest part to be close to that right-hand side, and I want it to get softer and softer as it goes across to the left. You know, I think that looks pretty good. I think we're going to leave it. I'm going to start working a little bit of texture into this foreground. So I'm going to put this brush actually aside. I'm going to play around with the fan brush a little bit. If I can find it. Here it is. Alright. Beautiful. Just a fan brush. Let's get some dark color on there. We have black in the background, so we can mix a pretty dark color and it's still going to stand out. I'm going to get some of this magenta and Payne's gray together. Make a dark purple color. I think that'll be pretty nice. Let's use that with our fan brush. Dark purple. Now we'll see if it's too subtle. Sometimes you mix a dark color, you put it on top of some black, and it's just too subtle to even show up. I'm just going to bounce it around, make some sort of little tufts of grass. It is real subtle, okay? We might add just a hint of white to that. So let's go back to our palette. Just mix a little bit of this white into that dark purple. And you see a little tiny bit of white mixed in will make a big difference in how much this texture we add sort of stands out. You can see I'm sort of flipping the brush over. I like to use all the different corners of the brush, really, explore the studio space with it. And you can turn it vertical and just pull out a couple little plants, little tufts of grass, little whatever you want to call them, just texture. And we'll go ahead and just work our way close to the bottom. I want to keep a lot of contrast. I want to keep a lot of dark space there. So I don't want to cover it too much with this light purple and magenta, but it's nice to have some patches of it. Really creates a nice little texture for you. Okay, we need some stars in that sky, maybe a couple more details, and we're going to call this painting done. So let's get over to our palette, give this fan brush a rinse, and we'll set that one aside. And we'll get out the trusty long little liner brush, get some white paint on there. And I like to sort of always flavor it a little bit. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of magenta to that titanium white. And let's get over to our canvas. And using that liner, just the lightest touch makes a very small star. Make sure you put a couple in the little sky holes shown between the trunks of the tree. And we're going to work our way sort of across the sky with that same very light magenta color that I mixed. It's mostly white. Like I said, I just kind of flavor it. I don't almost ever use white just on its own without adding a little bit of something to it. Something about putting the stars in the sky, I think, really brings the painting to life. All of a sudden I start hearing crickets. I feel like the night has come alive. And don't be afraid to put your favorite constellation in there. I'm going to put the Big Dipper. I don't know a whole lot about constellations, but I always spot that one. As you get down toward the horizon where the kind of brighter color is coming up, you can sort of just put a couple. And get a little bit more full in the upper part of the sky. I'm moving pretty quickly, but obviously you can take your time at home and put as many stars as you want. Sometimes when I really want to sort of nerd out on it, I go back and forth between these light magenta stars, and I'll mix up some light ultramarine blue or light purple sort of stars. And, it's one of those things that doesn't really stand out immediately, but it just adds a subtle element of realism to have the stars be slightly different colors like that. Alright, just adding a few with that shifted color that's a little bit more blue. And I think that's pretty good for the stars. Let's add just a couple little highlights on the water. We're going to add just another hint of color to the tree, and we're going to call this painting done. So on the water, for those highlights, I want some of this light blue, this sort of slightly lavender blue. Let's get back to our water and just find a couple of these darker shadows, and I'm just going to kind of go across the top and turn that into sort of just a hint, a suggestion of a little wave there. Alright, I think that's pretty good. Maybe, you know what, sometimes there's just a couple little hints in the distance that help tie it together. Alright, beautiful. Let's add a little bit more color to that tree. So over here I'm going to give this liner brush a rinse. And I just want to get a little bit more magenta. Just get a little wild, get a lot of magenta with a little bit of white. And these eucalyptus trees, one of the things I love about them is they have these, you know, the colorful bark. It's not quite as colorful as the rainbow eucalyptus that you'll find in Hawaii, but you often do see some nice orange or even a little bit of magenta. So I'm going to play around with that idea by in this moonlit scene with a little bit of magenta in the sky. I'm going to pop a little bit of magenta on the front of that trunk. Okay, a little bit more, I think. And maybe just a hint back behind that. All right. Folks, I think we're going to call this painting done. So I want to thank you very much for joining me. Make sure to like and subscribe. Acrylics made easy. And I tell you what, we're going to paint so many more paintings together. So thanks for joining, folks.